r/changemyview. CMV, we are not morally obligated to help others. The phrase inaction is thrown around a lot as an argument that we should help others, and if we choose to ignore it, we are immoral. However, I don't think that we as people are obligated to help anyone. It promotes the "if you're not with us, you're against us" type of mentality that separates people. Morality isn't black and white, and certain actions, including inaction, can be considered neutral. Neutrality is an option, and it is neither moral or immoral. An example that I've asked is if a person is strapped to a train track and they are going to die. If you don't pull a lever next to you to divert the train, are you a bad person, immoral, for not pulling the lever? Most people would say that you are a bad person and that we have a duty to help our fellow man. Then I would add, if the lever was across the street, would you go save the person? Most often, I would hear yes. What if the lever was across the country or across the world? At what point do we decide that it's not worth it to help someone at our cost? This is when most people get confused and have to think about it. Where does the line between moral and immoral get drawn? To me, saying that an action is immoral requires us to, in this scenario that I have given, calculate the value of a human life in terms of how much effort, time, or other cost that we would need to expend to save them. Another argument is that this view implies that every action that we do that isn't helping the cause is immoral. You can define the cause as whatever you think is helpful, but in my case, I would say it's whatever adds happiness to the world. Utilitarian view. It becomes almost comical at this point when we can call someone immoral for watching TV or taking a nap because their inaction is currently not helping the countless amounts of issues that we have today. If I were to assume this viewpoint, I could point at any person viewing this post and criticize your immorality for not going out and helping the world. Don't get me wrong though, helping others is generally a good thing and I would usually consider it a moral action. I just don't think that not helping someone would make us immoral. The thing that would be immoral if we were the one harming others. In contrast to this, there are times where sitting back and letting the events play out is the right choice for all parties involved. Letting someone solve the issue themselves can be more beneficial in the long run. Selflessness is a good trait to have. I just don't think that it is a logical decision to consider someone who doesn't help us harmful or immoral. However, someone who is responsible for someone should have the moral obligation to help them. A parent, teacher, healthcare professional, etc. If they have accepted responsibility, then they are obligated. One counter-argument that I have heard is from a Judeo-Christian view in which we are all immoral beings in the first place, and that we are trying to atone for our sins. I can't argue against that, since I would be attacking their fundamental sense of values at that point. However, my opinion is that we are fundamentally neither good or bad. I would like to further elaborate that helping people is good. Don't mix up what I'm saying with helping is bad, and we shouldn't do it. I posted this on r/unpopular opinions earlier, but I think this sub is more appropriate. Edit. I'm not sure if I can give out multiple for the same reason, but I'll try to all of the relevant comments. My understanding is that we have a moral obligation to help others for the sake of society. The cost of helping others, however, is subjective and we cannot determine where to draw the line between an action being moral or immoral. This lack of concrete rules of when to help doesn't mean that I should consider the cost at zero too much to help, meaning that if the cost is none or close to none, it is my responsibility to help. However, since it is subjective, we should lay back on whether someone not helping should be considered immoral or not, since we all have different opinions of what costs are worth helping. We each set our own moral standards. You're not morally obligated to do anything unless you can't live with the consequences of your action or inaction. Personally, if someone faced great suffering or death because I wasn't willing to do something fairly simple, it would haunt me. It'd be something that came up over and over in my head and make me feel like an awful person. I do feel like I'd be morally obligated to help. That doesn't mean that you would feel that way. I would argue that inaction would make other people feel like that you were morally bankrupt if they found out though. I wouldn't say that it was murder, but I would say that your flippant approach to other people is disgusting. If there's no negative consequences to you helping the person, I don't personally see the moral justification for not doing it. Think of morality as a function of protecting and preserving yourself. The moral obligation to help others helps build society norms and standards. By offering to save the kin of others, it will lead to others saving your kin, or yourself. When you don't subscribe to that, you are hurting the people you are responsible for and yourself. The hypothetical choices you gave are really just mental exercises that can be used to illustrate the above. When given the choice on a hypothetical situation, not doing anything is hypothetically harming others. You have all the mental power in that situation to resolve it morally without any actual burden to yourself. But in the real world, it is always going to be different. Nothing is completely clear-cut, and we only have a limited bandwidth to process the world around us. We don't have that same power to help others as in the hypothetical. But within our limited capacity and power, we want to help ourselves by protecting our society. Let's tackle what exactly a moral obligation is. It's not legal, that's a distinct standard. I personally use the cost/benefit analysis for moral obligations. How much of a burden is it to me versus how much of a benefit is it to the person who needs help? If the burden to me is slight and the benefit to another is extremely high, I'm morally obligated. For instance, call 911 if I see someone's house is on fire. The higher the burden, the less I'm obligated. For instance, running into a burning house. Same thing if the benefit is less. For instance, running into a burning building to retrieve someone's wallet. But there absolutely is a moral obligation at some point along the way, if all that is expected of me is very little to save a person's life, livelihood or well-being. And I, as well as most people, would recognize that obligation and judge others harshly for not meeting their CMV. The death penalty is never right in any circumstance. So, my opinion of the death penalty is based in 4 arguments. 1. Many people say that the death penalty is cheaper and less of a burden on taxpayers than a life sentence. But from what I see, it's largely more expensive to kill someone than to keep them in prison for life. So I don't think that's a great argument, though if it was done correctly I could see how the death penalty would be cheaper. 2. I truly don't think the death penalty is a good deterrent to crime. From what I know, many if not most of murders are like spur of the moment things. Like most of the time when someone murders they aren't weighing the consequences in their head, they just do it. Same with rape and other crimes. 3. I don't think that the death penalty in the way we have it is a safe bet as far as screening out innocent individuals. As far as I know, a not insignificant portion of death row inmates are innocent. As much as our justice system tries to prevent this, many innocent people get killed. I don't see how a system that even lets a few innocent people get murdered by the state is a system we should keep in place. 4. Even if it is cheaper and a better deterrent as well as being foolproof, I don't think anyone, no matter how guilty, should be murdered by the state. Not only is execution often very painful, but I don't agree that life is something the state should ever have the authority to legally take. I also don't see how many politicians who support the death penalty also say they support small government when, in my opinion, state-sponsored killing is the epitome of too large government. I'm open to differing opinions, and if anyone wants sources I can definitely cite them in a comment. I don't see the death penalty as an actual punishment, but like a deterrent to crimes that the courts have to scare would-be offenders. I do agree that mandatory death sentences are stupid, but I don't think that we should limit the judge's power by preventing them from passing the death sentence. Just because murder can get you death does not mean every murderer is sentenced to death. Then again, there are murders so heinous I think universally we'd all agree the murderer deserved death. So that's why I see the death penalty as more of a deterrent and a last resort. My argument is that for these killers, really bad people etc., they become repeat offenders once they are freed from prison, and others continue to do these things because they can. A large deterrent of repeats and first time offenders can be the chance of getting sent to death for these crimes against humanity. It's cheaper. No, it's not. The drugs used are expensive and the average death row inmate is therefore 15 years. My argument to that is that we are all going to pay our taxes one way or another. Such a small amount of what you're paying is probably going to the prisons. So what does it matter to you? Do you really mean any circumstances? What about a circumstance in which a society is too poor to effectively imprison someone? I'm thinking hunter-gatherers or even a very poor society. Or something like the Wild West of the late 1800s. What do you do with very dangerous people when you lack the ability to maintain a prison system? For me, that's a circumstance when we must allow the death penalty. I'm against the death penalty in general, and I agree that there are plenty of good reasons for not using that as a method of punishment. However, there are certain instances, as with Anders Behring Breivik in Norway, a right-wing terrorist who killed 77 people, most of them kids, where I don't think it necessarily would have been wrong to punish him by death. I oppose the death penalty, and don't think any modern state should implement it. However, your stance in any circumstances is problematic. What happens if the government has such limited resources that they don't have the capability to effectively imprison someone? If you exiled them instead, then they could either come back and do the same crime, or go assault/murder/rape/whatever in another place. If the state doesn't have the resources to keep violent criminals imprisoned, then executing the guilty can be justified on the basis that there are no other measures which will keep the public safe. This justification only exists as long as there aren't enough resources available to run a prison. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, or don't and I'll just be standing here.